In this life, each of us has experienced moments of anger. Anger is like a sudden fire that erupts, consuming both body and mind, causing us to lose clarity and harming ourselves and those around us. The Buddha once taught that with one rise of anger, countless karmic obstacles open up. Just one moment of ill will, and a torrent of misfortunes and suffering will rush in like an open door. Have you ever wondered why people get angry so easily? And why, after moments of rage, do we feel exhausted, empty, and regretful? Anger doesn't arise spontaneously. It is nurtured by tiny seeds in the mind, from attachment, from ego, from wanting everything to go our way. When life doesn't proceed as desired, when others' words touch our self-esteem, when circumstances are unfavorable, we often let anger erupt. It's like holding a hot coal to throw at someone else, but first and foremost, our own hand gets burned. Yet, how many times in life do we repeat this, still embracing the fire of anger to burn ourselves? In Buddhist scriptures, anger is taught to be one of the three poisons, along with greed and delusion, that are the root causes of all suffering. When anger arises, wisdom is obscured, compassion is pushed aside, and peace of mind vanishes. At that moment, we no longer see who is right or wrong, no longer distinguish between loved ones or strangers. We only want to quickly unleash the fire of anger. But after the rage subsides, what often remains is remorse, regret, and sometimes wounds that can never heal. If we observe carefully, we will realize that in daily life, there are countless situations that easily trigger our anger. An unkind word from a loved one, a thoughtless action by our children, a minor incident in society, or even an unwelcome glance can ignite us like a fire. Yet, if we look back, we will see that most of these things are not worth sacrificing our peace for. Anger doesn't solve problems. It only complicates them further. It makes us suffer, makes others suffer, and leads to many unpredictable consequences. The Buddha once advised that a wise person recognizes anger within themselves and does not let it take control. When anger arises, we need to stop, take a deep breath, and remind ourselves that this is just a passing wave. If we let it go, it will dissipate like clouds. If we hold on to it, it will become a storm that sweeps away all peace from our soul. The only way to escape suffering is to learn to let go. The first lesson we can draw is that anger never brings happiness. It is merely a fire that burns us, incinerating the good things in life. To lessen suffering in the mind, we must learn to recognize and cultivate equanimity. Instead of nurturing anger, let us nurture compassion. Instead of letting the fire of anger burn, let the light of wisdom guide the way. Only then can we truly walk the path the Buddha taught, the path of peace and liberation in daily life. Perhaps each of us has experienced moments in everyday life where we lost our composure, allowing anger to overpower reason. Sometimes these are minor conflicts within the family, between spouses or parents and children. Sometimes it's just a careless remark, a clumsy action, or even a disapproving look. Yet anger easily flares up, obscuring all clarity, causing us to say hurtful things and act impulsively, only to be filled with endless remorse afterward. Many people, after their anger subsides, quietly sit and regret, wondering why they couldn't control themselves, why they let emotions overpower them to the extent of destroying the warmth and peace in their home. This is a reality that anyone can understand and empathize with, because anger is a very common instinct in humans. But precisely for this reason, the Buddha advised us to learn to master anger, because anger not only harms others, but also destroys oneself. In Buddhist teachings, there is a profound saying, "One thought of anger arises, hundreds of thousands of obstacles open." Just a small thought of anger can open up thousands of calamities, leading us to wrong actions and sowing countless negative karmic seeds. Anger clouds the mind, causing us to lose mindfulness. When we are angry, we often only see others' faults and not our own. Anger is like a thick smoke covering our eyes, preventing us from recognizing the light of wisdom. A person in a fit of rage is like a drunkard, unable to control their words and actions, and then must suffer the consequences. Therefore, the Buddha always emphasized that anger is one of the three poisons: greed, anger, and ignorance. If greed makes us insatiable and ignorance makes us deluded, then anger is the fire that burns everything, causing the mind to be restless, wisdom to be obscured, and family happiness to shatter. In a verse, the Buddha once said, "The fire of anger burns away merit, just as a small fire can burn down a vast forest of merit." This means that a person can accumulate much merit, but just one time allowing anger to flare up can destroy all that merit. Just as when we cultivate a garden, sowing many flowers and fruits, but just one accidental fire can turn that entire lush garden into ashes. Anger is truly that dangerous, and that is why a wise person, one with insight, must know how to keep a calm mind, control their anger so as not to destroy the happiness they have painstakingly built. The Spiritual Buddhist Teachings channel would like to share the story of Mr. Hung, a construction worker, as a clear illustration. One tired afternoon, returning home from work, he saw that dinner wasn't yet on the table, and anger flared up. He overturned the entire tray of food that was being prepared. In his rage, he thought his wife didn't respect him, didn't care for him. But just a few minutes later, when he heard his child coughing heavily in the room, he realized his wife was rushing to care for their sick child. Seeing her red, trembling eyes wiping the spilled food from the floor, Mr. Hung's heart suddenly tightened. His recent anger filled him with a piercing regret. Just because of his impulsiveness, he had hurt his life partner, who was already burdened with many hardships, and he also brought pain to his own heart. That incident made him restless for a long time. He realized that anger truly brings nothing good. It only shatters affection and destroys the warmth and peace in the family. Through this story, the Spiritual Buddhist Teachings channel clearly sees one thing. When angry, we only see things through the distorted lens of our ego. We are no longer clear-sighted enough to see the whole truth. If Mr. Hung had been a little calmer, if he had taken the time to understand his wife's circumstances, he would not have acted so rashly. This is what the Buddha wanted to remind us. Anger obscures wisdom. A mind ablaze with anger can no longer distinguish right from wrong, no longer cherish affection, and easily pushes oneself and loved ones into suffering. In modern life, we also often encounter similar situations. There are people who, out of anger, hit their children, then regret the emotional scars left on the child. There are couples who, just because of a late dinner or an unintended word, argue, become distant, and then break up. There are people who, due to a small conflict at work, act impulsively, lose opportunities for advancement, and even lose their jobs. Looking back, we will see that the consequences of anger do not stop at the moment of outburst, but have prolonged effects on relationships, career, and even the future. So, how can we become less angry? How can we master anger? First, we need to remember that anger is not our true nature. The deepest nature of human beings is gentleness and compassion. But due to ignorance, due to habits and habitual tendencies, we easily surrender to the fire of anger. Recognizing anger when it first begins to sprout is an important step. The Buddha once taught that when anger first arises, it is like a small spark. If extinguished in time, it will cause no harm. But if allowed to flare up, it will become a large fire, difficult to control. A practical exercise is to practice deep breathing and contemplate when angry. When we feel anger rising, stop, take a deep breath, then exhale slowly, contemplating that this anger is just a passing cloud. If we hold on to it, it will become a storm. If we let it go, it will dissipate. Instead of reacting hastily, let's give ourselves a moment of silence for the mind to settle. We can also practice looking at things with an eye of compassion, putting ourselves in others' shoes to understand that everyone has their own suffering. Besides that, we also need to nurture the seeds of compassion and patience in daily life. When we know how to love others, we will blame less and demand less. When we cultivate patience, we will have fewer outbursts and act less foolishly in the spur of the moment. Self-control is not weakness. It is a great strength because it helps us maintain happiness, harmony in the family, and peace in the soul. The most valuable thing we realize from the Buddha's teachings is that anger only brings suffering. But if we know how to control and let go, we will maintain happiness. One who can master anger is also one who can master their own life. And when we learn to let go of anger, we not only save ourselves, but also bring peace to those around us. Therefore, the practical lesson here is, when anger arises, do not hastily let it control you. Stop, breathe, contemplate, and then choose to act with wisdom, not with emotion. A little patience maintains harmony. A little letting go preserves relationships. A little compassion maintains peace in the heart. That is also the path the Buddha taught, the path of patience, compassion, and wisdom. The path that leads us out of the cycle of suffering caused by anger, to find serenity in every moment of life. Perhaps in everyday life, each of us has at one point uttered the phrase, "If only I hadn't lost my temper then," because just one moment of losing self-control can sometimes lead to lifelong consequences. Anger is like a storm wind, arriving suddenly, sweeping away all the peace we once had. Some lose their health, some lose their happiness, others lose their honor and career, just because they couldn't control momentary emotions. Thus, the consequences of anger are not only in impulsive words or actions, but are also deeply etched on the body mind, and even social relationships. The Buddha once taught that no enemy is as dangerous as anger in one's own heart. Anger not only burns away peace of mind, but also gnaws at the body, turning a healthy person sickly. When angry, the heart beats faster, blood pressure spikes, breathing becomes rapid, and the body is put into a state of extreme stress. If this condition recurs frequently, over time, it can lead to illnesses such as heart disease, high blood pressure, and even stroke. Modern doctors have also proven that anger causes the body to release many toxins, disrupt hormonal balance, affecting the liver, stomach, and immune system. This means that just one moment of anger can push us towards serious illnesses, turning the joy of life into constant suffering. Not only does it destroy the body, but anger also leaves heavy psychological scars. When we get used to reacting with anger, the soul gradually becomes restless, easily agitated, and prone to anxiety. People who are often angry are rarely trusted by others, gradually lose self-confidence, fall into an inferiority complex, and even depression. They feel lonely because family and friends avoid contact and conversation. Many families shatter simply because no one is willing to lower their ego and allow anger to overshadow compassion. A harsh word spoken in anger can wound a child's heart for life, causing them to grow up with difficult-to-erase psychological scars. A slap in a parent's anger can sow fear in a child's heart, leading to a loss of faith in love in society. Uncontrolled anger can also lead to larger tragedies. Some people, because of a minor verbal altercation, get into fights, then get entangled with the law. Some people, due to pride, act thoughtlessly, causing harm to colleagues and friends, and then lose the career they built. When the fire of anger flares up, people easily do things they would never normally consider. And when the consequences occur, regret comes too late. The story of Min, a young man who works as a driver, is a typical example. One day, on his way home from work, Min's motorcycle lightly brushed a pedestrian. It was just a small scratch that could have been completely resolved with an apology. But in a moment of anger, Min disregarded reason, plunged into an argument, and then a physical altercation. As a result, both had to be hospitalized, and Min was disciplined by his company and lost his job. All of this stemmed from a small incident that could have ended with a little give and take. Career, health, honor, relationships, all were damaged just because of one moment of not controlling anger. Through this story, we clearly see that the consequences of anger are sometimes immeasurable. It starts from something very small, but can inflate into a large fire, burning down everything we painstakingly built. The ancients said, 1 minute of anger, 100 days of regret. That teaching remains valuable to this day. Anger is a hidden enemy. It not only destroys a moment, but also sows seeds of long-term suffering. In Buddhist teachings, the consequences of anger are likened to a negative seed sown in the earth. Once sown, it will sprout, grow, and bear fruit. One who sows anger will inevitably reap suffering. Perhaps not immediately, but one day, what we caused in anger will return as karmic retribution. Perhaps it will be a loss of health, estrangement in family relationships, or failure in a career. And at that time, we will truly realize that anger is like stabbing oneself in the heart with a knife. To avoid these consequences, we need to learn to let go of anger from the smallest situations. When you feel anger arising, remind yourself that anger will destroy your happiness. Practice deep breathing. Practice stepping back to see things from multiple perspectives. Practice putting yourself in others' shoes to understand that everyone has their own suffering. When you understand, you will be less angry. When you love, you will no longer want to hurt anyone. Another effective practice is to maintain mindfulness in every action. When eating, know you are eating. When walking, know you are walking. When speaking, know you are speaking. This awareness will help us recognize anger the moment it first stirs. And once recognized, it will weaken and dissipate. The Buddha once said, "There is no fire as fierce as the fire of anger. There is no evil as great as the mind of anger." Therefore, to live a peaceful life, we must know how to extinguish that fire the moment it first appears. The lesson for us is that 1 minute of anger can cost us our health, happiness, and honor. No one but ourselves will have to bear those consequences. If we know how to let go, we will maintain peace. If we know how to be patient, we will maintain family bonds. If we know how to be compassionate, we will maintain lasting happiness. The path the Buddha taught is not a coercive path, but a path that opens up choices for us. We can choose anger and descend into suffering, or we can choose to let go and step into peace. And when we know how to choose correctly, life will be lighter, the soul will be tranquil, and surrounding relationships will be warmed by love. In this life, there is a suffering that almost everyone has experienced: being insulted, scolded, or having hurtful words spoken by others. Sometimes it's just a fleeting remark, but it lingers in our minds, causing us to lose sleep, our hearts filled with resentment, wanting to retaliate, or at least retort. It is this attachment to those words that causes us to lose our peace of mind. Some people suffer and torment themselves over criticism and humiliation, their spirits sinking. Some people, provoked by someone, lose their temper, leading to arguments and shattered relationships. There are also those who, unable to maintain composure, accidentally speak or act rashly, causing consequences they regret for life. But the Buddha once taught us a very profound lesson. Others' words only have power when we accept them. If we do not accept them, those words will return to the person who uttered them. Once, a Brahmin came to the Buddha. This Brahmin, full of anger, stood before him and hurled the most venomous insults. He spoke words of offense, criticism, and humiliation, hoping to make the Buddha angry. But a miracle happened. The Buddha remained serene, his face calm, his eyes gentle. When the other man stopped, the Buddha asked, "Brahmin, if someone offers you a gift, but you do not accept it, to whom does that gift belong?" The Brahmin replied, "It still belongs to the person who offered it." The Buddha smiled and said, "Likewise, you offer me these insults, but I do not accept them, so they still belong to you. They have nothing to do with me." Upon hearing this, the Brahmin was stunned, awakened, and bowed his head in apology. The lesson from this story is incredibly valuable. It teaches us that anger can only arise when we accept those insults like an arrow piercing our heart. But if we let them fall to the ground, they cannot hurt us, just as when someone offers us a burden. If we do not carry it, it remains theirs. Their anger, their malice, cannot touch our mind if we know how to keep our heart peaceful. In everyday life, we can see similar situations occur. In a rural market, there's Mrs. Lan, who sells vegetables. One day, a hurried customer came to buy. The customer looked at the scale and, suspecting Mrs. Lan had shorted her, immediately scolded her terribly. Many people standing nearby also whispered and gossiped. If it were someone else, they probably would have argued back, reacting angrily. But Mrs. Lan only smiled kindly, offered more vegetables, and said, "If you feel it's not enough, just take more. I won't count it." The customer was speechless. Precisely because Mrs. Lan did not accept the insult, the customer's anger vanished. Instead, the customer blushed with shame and apologized to Mrs. Lan. If we put ourselves in Mrs. Lan's position, we would feel a sense of relief. Because if she had argued back, a dispute would have erupted. The customer might have left. Onlookers would have had something to gossip about, and anger would have spread. But thanks to her composure and gentle smile, Mrs. Lan maintained harmony, and the customer also learned a lesson in humility. This is the way to let go of anger that the Buddha taught. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha once said, "Hatred never ceases by hatred. By love alone does hatred cease." When we encounter an insult, if we retaliate with anger, the fire in both our hearts will blaze fiercely. But if we respond with equanimity and compassion, that fire has no fuel to burn and extinguishes itself. Anger is like a spark. If we add more fuel, it burns fiercely. But if we leave it alone, the wind will carry it away, and it will die out on its own. Try to think about your own life. How many times have you suffered just because of others' words? Sometimes a criticism, a sarcastic remark, makes us remember it forever, unsettling our minds. There are nights we can't sleep just because that phrase keeps echoing in our heads. But in reality, those words only exist in our minds because we have accepted them, allowed them to stay. If, at that moment, we smiled and thought, "That's their mind, not my mind. They said it because of the anger in them, and I don't need to accept it," then those words would float away like clouds across the sky, leaving no trace. As we live in this world, being misunderstood, criticized, or scolded is unavoidable. But each time, we have an opportunity to train our minds. Remember the story of the Buddha and the Brahmin. Don't react hastily. Don't let the fire of anger spread into your heart. Stop, take a deep breath, and tell yourself, "I do not accept this gift. It does not belong to me." Just doing this will bring the mind back to peace. When we practice this, life will be much lighter. Family, friend, and colleague relationships will also have fewer conflicts. People may be angry, but if we don't accept it, that anger is just a lonely wave with nothing to cling to. From that, we gradually learn the virtue of patience, the virtue of compassion, and our mind becomes increasingly steadfast. The ancients said, "One moment of patience brings 9 blessings." But patience is not weakness. It is the strength of wisdom. Only the weak easily get angry because they cannot control their own minds. Truly strong people are those who can smile amidst insult, keeping their hearts serene amidst the storm. Therefore, the lesson from the story of the Buddha And Mrs. Lan, the vegetable vendor, teaches us not to accept insults. Let them return to the one who uttered them. When we do not accept, we will not suffer. When we can let go of anger, we will find our hearts open and joyful. That is the path to peace that the Buddha taught. The Spiritual Buddhist Teachings channel would like to reiterate that anger only exists when we nurture it. Insults only hurt us when we accept them. If we know how to let go, how to be patient, how to smile, then those harsh words will be like wind passing through our ears. Let's cultivate the habit of not accepting insults so that our souls can be at ease. And each time we succeed in doing so, we sow a seed of compassion, a seed of peace into the world, not only for ourselves, but also for those around us. In the current of life, not infrequently do we find ourselves in situations that make our blood boil, words wanting to burst out, hands and feet trembling with anger. Just a criticism at work, a reproach at home, or a condescending look in society is enough to shake our minds. People often say, anger makes one lose wisdom. And indeed, when angry, people lose control of their words and actions. How many good relationships can be shattered by just 1 minute of anger? How much effort built into a career can be ruined by just 1 moment of losing composure? And above all, it is our own mind and body that bear the heaviest consequences from the fire of anger that flares up. The Buddha clearly saw this suffering of sentient beings, so he left us extremely simple yet profound teachings. These can become mantras to help us diffuse anger the very moment it arises. These 3 mantras seem very short, but if we truly understand and practice them, they open the door to peace. The first mantra is, anger harms oneself. The second is, the wise do not get angry. And the third is, though 8 winds blow, remain unmoved, seated firmly on a golden lotus. First, let's reflect together on the first mantra, anger harms oneself. Upon hearing this, many might be startled, because traditionally, we think anger is for dealing with others. Anger arises because we've been insulted. Anger is to let them know we disapprove. But in reality, anger does not hurt the other person. First and foremost, it causes us suffering. Anger rising causes the heart to beat faster, blood pressure to increase, face to flush, and head to spin. If we nurture anger for a long time, it becomes a toxin that destroys the body, leading to illnesses such as high blood pressure, heart disease, and stroke. Mentally, anger causes the mind to be restless, wisdom to be clouded, and clarity to be lost. In terms of karma, each time we get angry, we sow a bad seed in our mind, which will later bear the fruit of suffering. Therefore, anger is no different from stabbing ourselves in the heart with a knife, harming only ourselves. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha once taught, monks, there are these 4 types of people. What are the 4? 1 who harms oneself, 1 who harms others, 1 who harms both oneself and others, and 1 who harms neither oneself nor others. Among these 4 types, the one who harms neither oneself nor others is truly supreme. So when we get angry, which type do we belong to? Precisely the type that harms oneself and also harms others. The second mantra is, the wise do not get angry. The ancients had a saying, 1 moment of patience brings Yorsua's 9, blessings. Patience is not cowardice, but an expression of wisdom. A wise person is one who knows how to control themselves and remain calm in all circumstances. When attacked, they do not react hastily, because they know that a word spoken in anger can ruin an entire career and shatter a family. The wise understand that anger only makes them lose credibility and causes others to look down on them. Conversely, composure brings respect and trust from those around them. In Dhammapada, verse 223, the Buddha taught, "Conquer anger with loving kindness. Conquer evil with good. Conquer greed with generosity. Conquer the liar with truth." The wise do not let themselves fall into the 7 forms of anger, because they know that responding to anger with anger only makes the fire burn bigger. The third mantra is, "Though 8 winds blow, remain unmoved, seated firmly on a golden lotus." The 8 winds here are the 8 worldly conditions that constantly stir people's hearts: gain and loss, praise and blame, honor and dishonor, pleasure and pain. When we gain, we are happy. When we lose, we are sad. When praised, we are elated. When criticized, we are angry. When honored, we are proud. When humiliated, we suffer. When pleased, we cling. When faced with suffering, we complain. These are the 8 winds that cause people to waver. But the Buddha taught that for those with wisdom, for true practitioners, these 8 winds do not stir their hearts. Whether praised or criticized, whether gaining or losing, whether honored or humiliated, whether pleased or in pain, their minds remain serene and steadfast, like a lotus seated in mud, but untouched by the mud. This mantra teaches us that to escape anger, we must cultivate a steadfast mind, not allowing external circumstances to control us. To further illustrate these 3 mantras, let's hear a relatable story from modern life. There was a man named Tom, an employee in a company. In an important meeting, he presented his idea. However, a colleague harshly attacked and criticized him, even somewhat insultingly, in front of many people. At that moment, Tam's face flushed, his heart pounded, and a strong urge to rebut surged within him. He almost blurted out harsh words to defend his idea. But fortunately, in that instant, he remembered the mantra, "Anger harms oneself." He took a deep breath, choosing to remain silent and listen until the other person finished speaking. When the colleague was done, Tam gently responded, explaining each point clearly. His calm demeanor made the entire meeting room listen attentively. In the end, it was other colleagues who spoke up in support of him, while the attacking colleague became flustered. By keeping his mind calm, Tam not only defended his idea, but also maintained his credibility and the respect of everyone. That story teaches us that in modern life, the Buddha's 3 mantras still hold their value. If Tam had lost his temper and reacted aggressively then, the meeting would surely have become tense, colleague relationships would have fractured, and he himself would have lost everyone's trust. But by remembering that anger harms oneself, by understanding that the wise do not get angry, and by keeping his mind steadfast amidst the winds of criticism, he transformed danger into safety. When we practice these 3 mantras, we will gradually see ourselves change. Faced with unpleasant words, we will no longer react immediately, but will know to stop and breathe. Faced with unsatisfactory situations, we will no longer complain, but will know to accept and learn the lesson. Faced with life's praise and criticism, we will no longer be overly happy or sad, but will maintain a calm mind. That is spiritual maturity, steadfastness in life. You might ask how to remember these mantras in moments of anger. When anger flares up so quickly, we feel like a fire spreading. The answer is to constantly contemplate them, to train our minds to remember them every day. Read these 3 phrases repeatedly in the morning, evening, or whenever you have free time. Engrave them in your mind so that when anger just begins to stir, you immediately remember and stop. Like a soldier who practices daily, he reacts quickly in battle. If we only listen and forget, then when a real situation arises, we won't have time to use the teachings. The Spiritual Buddhist Teachings channel wants to convey that anger is a fire that burns us, and the Buddha's 3 mantras are 3 drops of ambrosia that can extinguish that fire. Remember that anger harms yourself, so don't let anger hurt you. Remember that the wise do not get angry, so choose the wise path of calmness and composure. Remember that though 8 winds blow, remain unmoved, seated firmly on a golden lotus, to keep your mind serene amidst the storms of life. When we live like this, we will see all suffering from anger gradually disappear. Instead, there will be a sky of peace, an open heart full of compassion and wisdom. There are sufferings in life that we often do not realize where they originate. But when we quiet our hearts, we see that the root of much unrest is precisely from anger. Each of us has experienced moments of losing control. Sometimes, just an unwelcome word, a minor action, or a fleeting misunderstanding can make us angry, leading us to be the first to bear the consequences. In the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Buddha once taught that one thought of anger can burn down a forest of merit. That teaching sounds like a mere metaphor, but in reality, it is a very profound truth. Because just a little anger arising can incinerate countless good deeds and merits that we have painstakingly cultivated for so long. In an instant, imagine a lush green forest that has grown for years, strong and vibrant. Yet just a small fire can turn it all into ashes. Our minds are the same. For many days and months, we strive to practice, do good, and keep our minds pure. Yet just 1 minute of losing control, one angry word uttered, one action in a fit of rage, can make us lose so many good things. This is not just theory in scriptures, but also present in everyone's daily life. There is a relatable story from everyday life that, when recounted, many people might see themselves in it. Mr. Fuchs' family was once peaceful, with a harmonious husband and wife and obedient children. However, during a dinner one evening, as the family gathered, their son accidentally dropped a bowl of soup. It was a minor incident that should have simply been gently cleaned up, allowing the meal to happily continue. But Mr. Fuchs, at that moment, couldn't control himself. He angrily shouted at his son and even slammed the table, startling the entire family. The son, feeling hurt, left the dinner, ran straight to his room, and slammed the door. The warm atmosphere of the family was instantly replaced by heavy silence. A single moment of anger from the father had inadvertently stolen the joy of the family gathering. That story doesn't just stay in a small kitchen, but reflects the reality in many homes out there. How many relationships are fractured just because of a harsh word? How many families lose happiness just because of groundless fits of anger? And how many people, after the rage subsides, realize, if only I had been calmer then, if only I had smiled instead of frowned, everything would have been different. But it is all too late, because once words are uttered, they are like arrows shot, impossible to retract. In Buddhism, anger is considered one of the 3 poisons: greed, anger, and ignorance. If greed makes us constantly crave and never feel enough, then anger is like a fire that burns everything we have, from merit and affection to career. People often say that just one moment of anger can ruin a lifetime of cultivation. Because when angry, we lose our reason, can no longer distinguish right from wrong, and only want to release the suppression in our hearts. It is at that moment that we easily utter bitter words, easily act thoughtlessly, and that very thing sows much suffering for the future. In modern life, these examples appear everywhere. Some people, because of a moment of anger at a drinking table, utter insults to friends, and then years of deep friendship collapse. Some people, just because of an argument at work, bang on the table and walk away, ultimately losing opportunities for advancement. Some people, even in blind rage, cause irreparable consequences, and then regret it for the rest of their lives. All these things show that anger not only causes suffering to others, but also causes suffering to ourselves. The Buddha once taught that if we counter anger with a compassionate heart, it is like extinguishing a fierce fire with cool water, because within each of us are the seeds of love and understanding. If we only know how to nurture it, the fire of anger will no longer have the opportunity to burn our minds. The person who knows how to be patient, who knows how to lower their ego in a fit of anger, is not weak, but is truly strong. For they have conquered themselves, conquered the fire within their hearts. Let's return to Mr. Fuchs' story. If, at that moment, he had stopped, taken a deep breath, and seen his child's clumsiness as just a small accident, he surely would have chosen to smile, cleaning up while gently advising his child. At that time, the meal would still have been complete with laughter, and the father-son bond would have grown stronger. That is a simple yet profound lesson for all of us. To let go of anger, we need to train ourselves daily. When anger arises, try asking yourself, is this worth losing my peace? Is it worth sacrificing family bonds or honor? Remember the Buddha's teaching. One thought of anger can burn down a forest of merit. When we remember that, the mind will naturally settle down. We will not easily get angry anymore. Practicing mindfulness is also a very effective way. When breathing slowly, clearly recognizing the emotions in our hearts, we will see that anger is just a passing cloud, not our true nature. It comes and goes. We don't need to hold on to it or nurture it. And when we know how to let go, how to let the wind carry away our impulsiveness, then our heart opens up, becomes light and peaceful. It can be concluded that anger is truly the root of much suffering. It destroys family bonds, burns away merit, and harms oneself and loved ones. But if we know how to recognize, control, and transform it, then each moment of anger becomes a valuable lesson that helps us grow on the path of spiritual practice. So, let's learn to let go. Learn to smile at things that go against our wishes. Learn to use compassion and wisdom to extinguish the fire of anger. Then, our lives will be lighter, our families happier, and our inner selves will abide in the peace that everyone yearns for. In life, we often encounter situations that make us feel annoyed, irritated, and want to react immediately. A thoughtless word from someone, a displeasing attitude, or an unexpected event can all agitate our minds. Typically, the first human reaction is anger, resistance, wanting to show the other person that we are not to be trifled with. But after those moments of outburst, what remains is often fatigue, regret, and even cracks in relationships. This is a suffering that anyone can easily feel because we have all experienced it at least once in our lives. Confucius said, "One moment of patience can avert 9 evils." A short teaching, yet it contains profound wisdom. Patience here is not weakness, nor is it inferiority. Rather, it is preserving peace for oneself, as well as maintaining affection and harmony for others. In Buddhism, the practice of patience is considered one of the noblest virtues. The Buddha once taught that a person with strength is not one who conquers 1,000 armies on the battlefield, but one who conquers oneself. Conquer greed, and the mind becomes light. Conquer ignorance, and wisdom shines. But conquering anger is truly great courage. Because when angry, people easily lose everything. But when they know how to be patient and keep their hearts at peace, they can overcome life's storms lightly. There is a simple yet profound story about Ms. Hoa, a vendor in the market. That day, a customer came to buy, but criticized her goods, saying harsh words that made those around them uncomfortable. Instead of getting angry or arguing, Ms. Hoa just smiled, gently explained, and continued selling. The customer initially seemed displeased, but seeing her calm demeanor, without any fierce reaction, began to quietly observe. A few days later, the customer returned, this time buying many items and praising Ms. Hoa as a kind and patient person. This seemingly small story showed that true strength does not lie in harsh words, but in composure and patience. If Ms. Hoa had gotten angry and argued back then, she might have vented her frustration for a moment. But the customer would have left, and her image in everyone's eyes would have been greatly diminished. Patience is not weakness. It is great wisdom to preserve reputation and open opportunities. Ms. Hoa not only maintained inner peace, but also transformed the other person with her calm attitude. In the teachings of the Buddha, the practice of patience is one of the 6 paramitas, perfections, the 6 practices that lead people to the shore of enlightenment. A practitioner, without the practice of patience, easily loses merit, because anger is like a fire that can burn down a whole forest of merit. Worldly people are the same. No matter how talented they are, if they don't know patience, they can easily let one moment of anger ruin everything. Patience is the root for nurturing a compassionate heart and the foundation of wisdom. When we are patient, we give ourselves a moment of quiet reflection to see things with a calmer eye and thereby choose a more skillful and wise way to respond. In modern life, we easily encounter countless examples that demonstrate the necessity of patience. An employee at a company is scolded by their boss in front of colleagues. If they get angry and argue back, they might satisfy their anger for a moment, but the consequence is losing respect and even their job. Conversely, if they know how to listen, be patient, and then find the right time to discuss, they not only maintain the relationship, but also affirm their own integrity. Or in a family, husband and wife sometimes cannot avoid disagreements. A person who knows patience keeps the family peaceful, and both have the opportunity to sit down together to resolve issues. If everyone wants to win, the family will become a battlefield where love is eroded. Some people often think that patience means taking a loss, being looked down upon by others. But in reality, patience is to keep one's heart peaceful, so as not to lose great happiness over a small moment of wanting to win. A person who knows tolerance is a strong person because they do not let anger control them. Patience helps us avoid mistakes, protect relationships, and above all, nurture a compassionate heart. To practice patience, the Buddha advised us to contemplate often. When encountering harsh words, ask yourself, what good will come if I get angry? Will it solve the problem? Or will it only make things more complicated? When insulted, remember that the other person said it because their mind is also restless. And instead of anger, you can awaken compassion for them. Consider unpleasant words as fleeting winds, like echoes in a cave, coming and going, leaving no trace. The practice of patience is also linked to wisdom. If there is no wisdom, we will think that patience is defeat. But if there is wisdom, we will see that patience is the greatest victory. Victory not over others, but over one's own ego. Because the ego always wants to assert itself, to win. But wisdom knows that everything is impermanent. Praise and criticism are like passing winds and clouds. There is nothing to be attached to. When we practice patience, the mind will be lighter. The heart will be peaceful. We will find ourselves no longer easily angered, no longer drawn into useless arguments. Instead, we maintain composure, clarity, and thereby spread peace to those around us. Patience not only saves us from the suffering of anger, but is also a gift we give to our loved ones. Because when we are patient, our family is happy, our work is smooth, our relationships are good. We can clearly see that the practice of patience is truly a noble virtue, not only on the path of Buddhist practitioners, but also extremely necessary in everyday life. One act of patience preserves all peace. One moment of patience overcomes life's storms. Always remember that truly strong people are not those who win 1,000 battles externally, but those who conquer the fire of anger within their hearts. And when we conquer ourselves, we will find wisdom, compassion, and a serenity that nothing can disturb. In this life, there is a suffering that many of us have experienced, being criticized, looked down upon, or ridiculed by others for our appearance, circumstances, or some shortcomings. That suffering is not just a surface wound, but a silent wound in the soul. When despised by others, people easily develop resentment, low self-esteem, or even react by retaliating or speaking harsh words to protect their ego. But after that moment of reaction, the heart feels even heavier. The Buddha once taught that when we harbor a thought of contempt or slander, that seed will bear the fruit of suffering in the future. Conversely, if we practice patience and cultivate compassion, then good seeds will blossom and bear fruit, transforming both our appearance and our soul. In the scriptures, there is a famous story about Princess Kim Kwang. In a past life, she was a beautiful and proud princess. Once, she met a sick ascetic, thin and gaunt, with a suffering face. Full of arrogance, she uttered words of contempt and disdain. Just that one thought, that one word of disdain, became a negative karmic cause. The karmic retribution that followed was that she gradually became ugly, her beauty no longer radiant as before. External beauty is impermanent. Even a small negative action can change it. However, the miracle was that when the princess awakened, she began to practice patience, to contemplate and open her heart to compassion. Her appearance gradually became graceful, gentle, and radiant again. This is proof of the Buddha's teaching. Patience and compassion have the power to transform karmic obstacles, causing the lotus in the heart to bloom and the fragrance of virtue to shine forth, beautifying one's appearance. That story is not just an ancient fairy tale, but also a mirror reflecting life today. We see people in life who, as soon as they open their mouths, tend to criticize others. They criticize the poor for their old clothes, criticize the unattractive for not being pleasing to the eye, criticize the weak for not being competent. But few realize that when we harbor thoughts of criticism, we are planting seeds of suffering for ourselves. Because criticism stems from an arrogant mind, from comparison, from the habit of being self-centered. The more one criticizes, the less one is loved, and then they themselves become victims of alienation. There is a small, everyday story illustrating this. In an elementary school, there was a student named Han. Han was intelligent and good at her studies, and her family was well off. So many teachers liked her. But because she was spoiled, she developed arrogance, often criticizing friends from poor backgrounds, saying words that hurt her friends' feelings. Initially, these criticisms were just playful, but gradually, her friends felt hurt and began to shun Han. From a girl many people played with, Han became lonely, with no one wanting to confide in her. The feeling of being shunned by friends made Han shy and melancholic, even crying secretly in the corner of the classroom. Han herself experienced the karmic retribution of despising others. Although it wasn't a severe punishment, it was enough to make her tender heart feel pain. One day, during class activity, the teacher told the class a story about the Buddha teaching compassion and patience. She said that the most beautiful person is not one with luxurious clothes or a cute face, but one with a heart that knows how to love, how to be patient, and not criticize others' flaws. The teacher's words were like drops of water soaking into Han's soul. She began to think, began to feel regret for the words she had uttered. And then Han changed. From criticizing, she learned patience. She learned to speak words of encouragement. When she saw a friend in difficulty, she offered a helping hand. When she saw a friend wearing old clothes, she no longer laughed, but gently said that her friend was still very cute. This change gradually earned her friends' admiration. They came back, played with Han, and loved her as before. Her loneliness vanished, replaced by the joy of living in genuine friendship. Through both the story of Princess Kim Kwang and the small story of the student Han, we realize a profound truth. Patience and compassion can transform karma. A person may have once sown words of criticism, once harbored an arrogant mind, but when they return to self-correction, opening their hearts to patience and love, the old karma gradually transforms, and the fruits of happiness will come. The Buddha once said in the Dhammapada, "Hatred never ceases by hatred. By love alone does hatred cease." When we know how to use patience to counter contempt and compassion to resolve resentment, we are transforming our own karma and simultaneously sowing good seeds for others. In life today, we sometimes encounter sarcastic remarks from colleagues, contemptuous glances from family members, or malicious comments on social media. If we react angrily, we fall further into a spiral of arguments, like fighting fire with fire. But if we practice patience, practice silence, practice smiling with tolerance, then those malicious words naturally subside, just as the wind cannot blow away a mountain. Such is the strength of patience. It is not weakness, but the wisdom to step back and maintain peace of mind. Patience not only helps us resolve old karma, but also beautifies the soul and appearance. A kind and compassionate person, even if their facial features are not perfect, exudes a lovable quality that makes anyone who meets them feel at peace. In contrast, someone who is often angry and jealous, though beautiful, has an unpleasantness etched on their face that makes others wary. True beauty does not lie in makeup, but in the light of the soul, like Princess Kim Kwang, whose appearance became graceful thanks to patience, not thanks to golden jewelry. The lesson here is that each of us should practice letting go of the habit of criticizing. Instead, offer words of encouragement. When seeing others make mistakes, instead of blaming, be patient and advise. When seeing someone weaker, instead of ridiculing, offer a helping hand. When we sow seeds of patience and compassion into the world, we are sowing a harvest of happiness for ourselves. A Zen master once said that the one who has patience is the one with the greatest strength. Because someone who has won 1,000 battles on the battlefield may not have conquered themselves, but one who knows patience has conquered their ego, conquered anger, conquered arrogance. That saying reminds us that patience is not weakness, but a manifestation of great wisdom. The more capable one is of patience, the more respected and loved they are by others. So, in daily life, how do we cultivate patience and compassion to transform karma? First, we need to practice observing ourselves. When the thought of wanting to criticize arises in our hearts, pause for a moment, take a deep breath, and remind ourselves whether the words we are about to speak will hurt the other person. If so, choose silence. That silence is a step of patience. Next, we can practice looking at the strengths of others instead of their flaws. When we see someone poor, instead of criticizing, think that they are still bravely working. When we see someone clumsy, instead of laughing, think that they are still trying their best. This way of seeing is cultivating compassion. Additionally, we can read scriptures, chant, and contemplate cause and effect to always remind ourselves that today's words and thoughts are the causes that create tomorrow's results. When the mind is always directed towards compassion, words will be gentle, actions will be wholesome, and gradually we will see our lives change. People around us will love us more, and events that come to us will be gentler. That is the inevitable result of patience and a compassionate heart. As we conclude the story of Princess Kim Kwang and the lesson from the student Han, we see a common point. The path from darkness to light is not outside, but within the change of heart. When we know how to be patient, how to let go of arrogance, and open our hearts to compassion, our faces will brighten, our smiles will be warmer, and our lives will be filled with peace. That is the way to lessen suffering, to beautify both body and mind. So from now on, when you hear a criticism, see it as an opportunity to practice patience. When you want to criticize someone, change it into a compliment. When you want to react, smile. That is a simple but effective way to transform karma and keep your heart at peace. As the Buddha taught, tears and smiles both come from the heart. If our heart is at peace, our appearance will naturally be beautiful, and our life will naturally be light. In life, there are times when we are pushed to the wall. There are times when we are wrongly accused, harmed, or have our honor and body hurt by others. At such times, anger often flares up intensely, urging us to resist, to retaliate, to find every way to prove ourselves right. But the miraculous thing is that in these very adversities, if we maintain composure, maintain a patient heart, we not only overcome suffering, but also accumulate immeasurable merit. Before his enlightenment, the Buddha also underwent agonizing trials to cultivate the practice of patience. And it was this practice of patience that was the foundation that led him to the complete state of enlightenment. The Jataka scriptures record the story of the Buddha's past life. At that time, he was a sage practicing in the forest, taking patience as his primary practice. Rumors of his virtue and serenity spread everywhere, reaching the ears of King Kali, a king known for his temper and brutality. The king wanted to test how patient the sage was, so he sent people to bring him to the court. Before his ministers, the king ordered his ears, hands, and feet to be cut off, to see if he would get angry. His body was tormented to the point of being covered in wounds, bleeding profusely. But the sage maintained a serene expression, without a word of complaint, without a look of hatred. He only gently said, "This body can be cut and dismembered, but my mind cannot be cut and dismembered. You can take my body, but you cannot take my practice of patience." That statement shook the entire court. The ministers were astonished, and King Kali awakened, deeply ashamed by the sage's patience and compassion. From then on, the king changed his character, reduced his brutality, learned humility, and respected the ascetic. That sage was one of the previous incarnations of the later Shakyamuni Buddha. That story is not just an anecdote, but also emphasizes a truth. The practice of patience is the greatest power of humanity, the key that opens the door to liberation. If we compare, we will see that the strength of a great army can only temporarily hold a fortress. But the strength of a patient person can conquer hearts and sow good seeds for generations. The Buddha went through many lives, cultivating patience with his own flesh and blood, so that later, when seated under the Bodhi tree, he had enough power to face the demonic forces and remain serene and unmoving. Patience is not blind endurance, but active self-mastery, so as not to be swayed by external circumstances. Patience is also not weakness, but wisdom, that clearly sees that all suffering is temporary, while peace of mind is eternal. In everyday life, we also encounter challenges that, though not as fierce as the sage's story, are enough to make it difficult for us to remain calm. Imagine when we are slandered, when others fabricate stories to harm us, when our honor is insulted in front of many people. The natural reaction is to want to yell, to want to retaliate immediately. However, if we do so, we only make matters more complicated, lose more credibility, and sometimes even allow others to take advantage. Conversely, if we maintain patience and find a proper way to resolve the issue, the truth will reveal itself, and our honor will not only not be lost, but will become more steadfast. There is a relatable, everyday story worth pondering about this. In a certain village, there lived an old man named Loy. He lived a gentle life, worked hard, but unfortunately became embroiled in a land dispute with his neighbor. The greedy neighbor falsely accused Mr. Loy of encroaching on land and spread rumors everywhere that he was dishonest. Wrongly accused, Mr. Loy was very frustrated. His relatives advised him to confront, scold, and sue immediately. But Mr. Loy chose silence, did not argue, did not use harsh words. He patiently collected documents, evidence, and calmly asked the local authorities to resolve the matter. After some time, the truth was revealed. It turned out that he had not encroached on any land, but rather the neighbor was the dishonest one. The villagers then clearly saw Mr. Loy's integrity. They respected him even more, calling him a virtuous man who did not get angry, did not make a big deal out of it, but preserved his honor and the truth. The neighbor, on the other hand, lost all credibility. No one trusted his words anymore. The lesson from that story shows that patience and composure in the face of challenges are the ways to maintain honor and long-lasting blessings. If we place the two stories of the Buddha's previous life and Mr. Loy's story side by side, we will see a clear common point. Both were tested by injustice, but instead of getting angry, they chose the path of patience. It was thanks to that patience that they transformed adversity into opportunity, turned suffering into strength, and left a shining example for future generations. This reminds us that in a storm, if we utter angry words, we are like a lamp in the wind, easily extinguished. But if we maintain patience, we are like a steadfast mountain. No matter how fierce the storm, we remain unmoved. The Buddha taught that there are three fires that burn sentient beings: greed, anger, and ignorance. Among them, anger is the fiercest fire, the easiest to flare up. People may gradually degenerate because of greed, may be deluded because of ignorance, but because of anger, they can, in just one moment, commit irreparable sins. Knowing this, we need even more to learn the virtue of patience to extinguish the fire of anger. Patience is the cool water that extinguishes that fire. It is the shield that protects us from the arrows of hatred. Practicing patience in everyday life is not easy, but not impossible. Start with small things. When someone says harsh words, instead of immediately retaliating, take a deep breath and think of the story of the sage in the Jataka scripture. When misunderstood by others, instead of getting angry, remember the image of the gentle Mr. Loy and tell yourself that the truth will never be hidden. When anger rises, chant the Buddha's name so that the sound of the Buddha's name sprinkles cool water on the anger in your heart. If you persevere in practice, you will gradually find your mind becoming calmer. External events may still be complicated. Others may still utter malicious words, but you will no longer be easily swayed. That is when the virtue of patience begins to bear fruit. And when you are steadfast in the practice of patience, your life will be free from much suffering. Others may test you, but they cannot take away your peace. The Spiritual Buddhist Teachings channel sends you a gentle reminder. If one day you are insulted, slandered, or unfairly criticized by someone, remember the story of the Buddha's previous life and the lesson from Mr. Loy. Be patient, keep your heart calm, and the truth will speak for itself. Believe that the virtue of patience is immeasurable strength, a lamp illuminating the path to liberation from suffering. Patience is not just letting go of anger, but also sowing seeds of compassion and wisdom into the soil of the soul, so that one day the flower of enlightenment will bloom within you. My dear friend, we continue into a very special section where the teachings of the Blessed One to Rahula, his son, become a timeless lesson for all of us about the practice of patience and how to maintain peace of mind. In life, no one can avoid conflicts, from the small family to the larger society. Sometimes, just a thoughtless word, an accidental action, or an unexpected incident can create a heavy atmosphere, giving rise to vexation. People often easily get angry, blame, complain, and from there, relationships that could have been harmonious become fractured. We often forget that in anger, we ourselves are the first to suffer. The fire of anger burns the soul, causing us to say things that shouldn't be said, do things that shouldn't be done. And then afterward, we ourselves are filled with endless regret. The Buddha taught Rahula that to walk the path of peace, one must first learn patience. He said, "Contemplate the body as earth. Earth receives everything from beautiful flowers to trash and filth. Earth neither gets angry nor refuses. It just quietly embraces all and then naturally transforms everything." A person with a patient mind is the same. When praised or criticized by others, when given beautiful flowers or receiving bitter words, if they can maintain composure without resentment, without getting angry, then their mind will be peaceful like the earth. He also taught, "Contemplate the mind as water, as fire, as wind. Water is cool and cleansing, washing away worldly dust, containing both clarity and turbidity, and then settling clear. Fire can burn, but also warm. Wind can sweep away, but also cool. All are merely the operation of conditions. And if we know to cultivate our minds like these elements, we will learn how to transform all adversities, not be controlled by them, not let anger take over." To make the teaching more vivid, let's look at an everyday story. There was Mrs. Mai, a mother-in-law living in a rural village. Her son married, and the daughter-in-law was rather clumsy and unfamiliar with cooking. On her first day in her husband's home, she fumbled with the rice, not knowing how to manage the fire. The rice ended up burnt, with smoke billowing out. Everyone expected Mrs. Mai to scold and reproach her, but she only smiled kindly and gently said, "Next time, use less fire, and the rice will be better." It was that compassionate attitude that made the daughter-in-law no longer afraid, and she gradually learned to cook well. Thanks to Mrs. Mai's patience and love, the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship became close, their affection growing deeper. Everyone in the village praised her, saying she had a heart like the earth, like water, embracing and transforming, so that there were no storms in the family. If Mrs. Mai had gotten angry and scolded, perhaps the daughter-in-law would have felt hurt, would have cried, and would have found life as a daughter-in-law very difficult. Those small animosities could have grown into cracks. But because she understood the principle of patience, she sowed good seeds, nurturing a home filled with love. This is a vivid practice of the Buddha's teaching to Rahula. Let's reflect on our own lives. How many times have we lost our temper with our children over a small mistake? How many times have we reproached our spouse over a trivial matter? How many times have we allowed anger to cloud our wisdom, turning our home into a place filled with sighs? But if, in those moments, we had known to stop, breathe, contemplate the body as earth, contemplate the mind as water, then everything would have been different. The words we uttered would have been gentler, our gaze softer, and the heart of the person before us would also have been soothed. Anger is like fire. If we add more fuel, it flares up. But if we pour in the water of compassion and patience, it gradually extinguishes. In the scriptures, the Buddha taught that patience is the supreme practice. It is no accident that he mentioned it many times, because when people face adversity, their first instinct is to react, to fight back, to get angry. But precisely then, if we learn how to be patient, we are winning the biggest battle, that is, conquering ourselves. The Dhammapada teaches that winning 1,000 battles on the battlefield is not equal to conquering oneself. Conquering oneself is the most glorious victory, and conquering oneself means knowing how to subdue anger, knowing how to keep a calm mind. If we apply these words to current life, we will find them extremely practical. A parent who always scolds their children when they make mistakes will only create fear and distance. But if they know how to be patient and gently guide them, the children will understand and be grateful. A leader who always shouts at employees only adds pressure to the team and loses trust. But if they can maintain patience and advise with sincerity, employees will respect them and dedicate themselves wholeheartedly. Even in friendships, marriage, or society, patience remains the key to maintaining lasting affection. I want to share another story about an old neighbor in a small village. He was known for his gentleness and often taught his grandchildren that one must have a heart as vast as the ocean. Once, people mistakenly accused him of stealing a chicken. The villagers whispered, and many even gave him dirty looks. But he did not argue, did not get angry, just quietly continued to live honestly. After some time, the real thief was discovered. Everyone was ashamed and came to apologize to him. He just smiled and said, "It's in the past. I don't hold a grudge." It was that patience that made the entire village respect him even more. If he had gotten angry and argued that day, perhaps the conflict would have dragged on, and he would have brought more suffering into his heart. So, how can each of us practice the Buddha's teaching to Rahula in daily life? First, practice looking at things with a calm eye. When someone says harsh words, instead of reacting immediately, take a deep breath. Remember that you are like earth and water. The earth doesn't get angry when people discard trash on it. Water doesn't blame when people wash their hands in it. We are the same. Let's be inclusive so that our minds are not muddied. Second, cultivate a compassionate heart. When we love others, we will be less angry with them. Seeing someone make a mistake, instead of blaming, we think that they are also suffering, also acting out of ignorance. A compassionate heart will dissolve anger. Third, frequently remember the Buddha's words, recite a verse, chant a name. Each time, it's as if we receive more strength to keep our hearts at peace. Patience is not enduring in suffering, but the power of transformation. A patient person understands that everything is impermanent. Today's adversity can become tomorrow's opportunity. A patient person also knows that if they get angry, they lose first. But if they maintain composure, they save themselves. The scriptures say that like a drum echoing in the void, patience resonates in people's hearts, earning everyone's respect. And finally, let us remember that patience is not only for the peace of others, but for our own peace. Keep a calm mind, and we live healthy and happy. Keep a calm mind, and we sow good seeds for the future. Keep a calm mind, and we are steadily walking on the path of enlightenment that the Blessed One walked. So, my dear friend, when faced with something displeasing, please remember the Buddha's teaching to Rahula. Contemplate your body as earth. Contemplate your mind as water, as fire, as wind. Practice tolerance, practice patience, practice love. Be like Mrs. May, gently teaching her daughter-in-law, like the kind old man forgiving, like water washing away worldly dust. When we can do this, anger will gradually dissipate, our hearts will gradually brighten, and peace will abound. In life, each of us experiences moments of injustice, situations where we feel we deserved more, but the outcome fell to someone else. At such times, anger and resentment often rise, even a desire for revenge. However, the Buddha taught that people suffer not because of external circumstances, but primarily because their minds do not know how to let go. Anger is like a fire that first burns our own body and mind, obscuring wisdom and leading to countless consequences. So, how can we overcome that anger? How can we transform injustice into a wholesome seed for ourselves? This is through practicing the 4 immeasurable minds: loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, that the Buddha taught. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha emphasized, monks cultivate the liberated mind of boundless loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. For monks, when the liberated mind of boundless loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity is cultivated, developed, and brought to full measure, it will attain great peace, dispelling all hatred and defilements. These teachings are like a guiding light, leading us out of the spiral of anger, because only love, empathy, genuine joy, and a mind of equanimity can heal the wounds left by anger. To make it easier to visualize, let's hear the story of Tuan, a typical man in modern society. He was a diligent employee, always striving in his work. After many years of dedication, he hoped for a promotion. However, when the time came, the opportunity went to another colleague. That colleague was not necessarily incompetent, but Tuan believed he himself was more deserving. The moment he heard the news, a fire of anger flared up in his heart. He felt betrayed, treated unfairly. If he had let that anger take over, Tuan might have chosen to be cold, envious, even trying to undermine his colleague out of revenge. However, after many restless days, Tuan remembered the Buddha's teaching on the four immeasurable minds. He reminded himself that if he kept holding on to hatred, the first person to suffer would be himself. He began to try to view the situation through a different lens. Instead of letting anger gnaw at his heart, Tuan chose to smile and congratulate his colleague. He didn't just stop at words, but actively offered support and collaborated to help his friend succeed in the new role. His compassionate heart, desiring to bring joy to others, dissolved the tension. Then he thought of compassion for the difficulties his colleague would face in the new position. Promotion is not only glory, but also a heavy burden of responsibility. If his colleague stumbled, wouldn't he face a lot of pressure and judgment? Therefore, Tuan offered his compassionate heart to help and share his experience, hoping to lessen the other person's suffering. Not only that, Tuan also practiced sympathetic joy. Instead of envy, he learned to rejoice in others' success. Initially, this was not easy, but whenever he saw his colleague being praised, Tuan reminded himself, "Your friend's success also contributes to the team's development, including yours." Thus, from an initial pretense of joy, genuine sympathetic joy gradually arose within him. Finally, Tuan practiced equanimity. He no longer fixated on who got promoted or who was recognized, because everything is impermanent. What is here today may be gone tomorrow. The most important thing is to keep one's mind at peace. Thanks to equanimity, Tuan no longer bound himself to comparisons and competition. His mind became lighter and freer than ever. And a miracle happened. After some time, precisely because of his compassionate and equanimous attitude, Tuan was highly regarded by his superiors. He was entrusted with many more important responsibilities. And finally, promotion came to him naturally, not through rivalry, but through the merit generated by cultivating a good heart. Tuan's story is clear proof that by practicing the four immeasurable minds, we not only resolve the anger in our hearts, but also open the door for good things to come into our lives. Because the law of cause and effect is unerring, sow good seeds and sweet fruits will ripen. In modern life, competition, comparison, and envy occur everywhere, at work, in the family, even among close friends. Many people harbor resentment for life over a single word or a small action. Yet, have we ever thought that when we are angry, the blood in our veins flows faster, our heart beats harder, our body feels more tired, our spirit gloomier? Anger can destroy health, leading to chronic illness. In contrast, just by activating a thought of loving kindness, a thought of rejoicing in others' success, and the mind immediately calms down, and the body also feels lighter. That is the miraculous power of the four immeasurable minds. Practicing loving kindness is sowing joy. A smile, a sincere blessing, is sometimes more precious than gold or silver. When we bring joy to others, we ourselves feel happiness spreading in our hearts. Practicing compassion is learning to empathize, listen, and share to reduce others' suffering. Just a hand clasp, an understanding gaze can soothe emotional wounds. Practicing sympathetic joy is learning to rejoice in others' happiness, no longer comparing or envying. When others succeed, we also rejoice, considering it a shared joy. And finally, practicing equanimity is letting go of attachment, maintaining a balanced mind in the face of gain and loss, victory and defeat, praise and criticism. In the Dhammapada, The Buddha once taught, "Hatred never ceases by hatred. By love alone does hatred cease." This is an eternal law. Practicing the four immeasurable minds is precisely using virtue to resolve hatred. An angry person is one who is burning themselves in the fire of anger. But if they know how to cultivate loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, that fire will extinguish. Instead, a bright lamp will illuminate the heart with compassion. Some will ask, how can I rejoice in the success of someone who took my opportunity? How can I bless someone who hurt me? The answer lies in this. If we harbor hatred, we only add to our suffering. But if we know how to let go, we free ourselves. That is not an act of weakness, but the strength of wisdom. Imagine a friend gets promoted, and you don't. If you are envious and resentful, the relationship will fracture, work will become more difficult, and your mind will not be at peace. But if you rejoice and offer support, you not only maintain the friendship, but also create long-lasting merit. That person's success also benefits you from the overall growth. And when the opportunity arises, you will be duly rewarded. Practicing the four immeasurable minds is not a distant theory, but small actions in everyday life. When you see someone suffering, cultivate compassion and seek to help. When you see someone happy, sincerely congratulate them. When someone hurts you, learn to forgive and let go. Practice a little each day, and gradually, your heart will open up and become more tolerant. To train yourself, each morning you can sit quietly, breathe evenly, and silently vow, "May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings experience joy. May all beings live with equanimity." Day by day, that vow will gradually permeate your heart, becoming a natural way of life. When you have loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, anger will have no place to cling. Because the root of anger is selfishness, is ego attachment. But when you think of others, when you let go of your ego, hatred has no reason to exist, just as when the sun rises, darkness naturally disappears. The lesson learned is that to lessen suffering, we don't need to change the whole world, but only our way of seeing and reacting. Instead of anger, we choose compassion. Instead of envy, we choose sympathetic joy. Instead of attachment, we choose equanimity. That is the path that leads us to peace. The Spiritual Buddhist Teachings channel would like to reiterate the Buddha's teaching. Hatred never ceases by hatred. By love alone does hatred cease. This is an eternal law. May each of us, when faced with adversity, instead of letting anger burn, practice the four immeasurable minds. Because then our minds will naturally be peaceful, our lives will naturally be free from suffering, and blessings will gradually accumulate and bloom in our very lives. In life, what people most easily stumble upon is a lack of patience. When facing difficulties, injustice, criticism, or insults, most of us tend to react immediately with impulsiveness and harshness. We imagine that doing so is to protect ourselves, but in reality, the more we resist, the deeper the wound in our hearts. Some people, for a single moment of impatience, ruin their entire lives. Some people, because of an angry word, shatter their families. Some people, due to lack of patience, lose good opportunities. That is why the Buddha taught that to keep the mind peaceful to resolve vexations, and to open the door to future blessings, one must practice patience. Patience is not weakness, but a great strength, capable of transforming past karma and sowing good seeds for the future. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha once taught, "There is no other thing, monks, that leads to such great fruit as the practice of patience. One who can be patient achieves great blessings and great wisdom." Patience is therefore one of the noblest virtues that a Buddhist practitioner needs to cultivate. It is like cool water that can extinguish the blazing fire of anger, like fertile soil for sowing seeds of compassion and wisdom. To clearly see the power of patience, let us return to the time when the Buddha was still in the world, and hear the story of Princess Kim Kwang, King Pasenadi's beloved wife. Legend has it, Princess Kim Kwang was famous for her beauty, capable of captivating a nation. But in a previous life, she had harbored arrogance and disdain for others, so the karmic retribution in this life was that her appearance became ugly. Her body hunched, her face no longer possessing its former beauty. King Pasenadi, who once loved her, seeing her change to such an extent, could not help but feel disheartened and alienated. The princess suffered immensely, complaining about her fate many times. But then she sought out the Buddha, who taught her that to transform karma, one must repent and cultivate the practice of patience. Princess Kim Kwang listened and began to diligently practice the Buddha's teachings. She was patient in the face of criticism, patient when confronted with her husband's indifference, patient when she saw herself inferior to other concubines. Every day, she knelt before the Buddha statue, sincerely repenting her past mistakes, and at the same time practicing to maintain a patient and compassionate mind. Gradually, thanks to this merit, her appearance returned to its former beauty, even more radiant. King Pasenadi, who had been alienated, grew to love and respect her even more. That story became proof that patience and repentance not only resolve old karmic results, but also open up new blessings in the future. The story of Princess Kim Kwang makes us realize a truth. Appearance can be changed by karma, but the mind can transform that karma into blessings if one practices. When we are patient, we are not swallowing resentment, but nurturing the seeds of peace. When we repent, we are not demeaning ourselves, but washing away mistakes and purifying our minds. Whoever knows how to be patient and repent will receive long-lasting blessings. In life today, we can also encounter countless examples similar to the story of Ms. Lian, an ordinary woman in society. Previously, Ms. Lian was hot-tempered and often harsh. Even a small family matter would make her raise her voice. Her husband initially endured it, but gradually, the accumulated tension made him disheartened, even thinking about divorce. Ms. Lian lived in unrest, always feeling like her family was about to fall apart. Then one day, when a friend invited her to listen to a Dharma talk at a pagoda, she suddenly awakened because the teacher taught that a woman who maintains patience makes her family peaceful. A woman who is often harsh makes it difficult for her family to be happy. That sentence struck her heart. She began to reflect on herself, realizing that for many years, her lack of patience had caused much suffering to her husband and children. She knelt before the Buddha, sincerely repenting. From that day on, she practiced patience. When her husband did something she didn't like, she took a deep breath, telling herself that anger would only make things worse. When her children made mistakes, instead of scolding, she chose gentle words to guide them. Initially, this was very difficult, because the habit of being hot-tempered was deeply ingrained. But she persevered every day, repenting before the Buddha, praying for his blessing to keep her mind peaceful. The result was truly surprising. After only a few months, her husband gradually changed his attitude. He no longer talked about divorce, but on the contrary, loved his wife more and more. He clearly saw his wife's efforts, her patience, and her sincere repentance, so he cherished her even more. Thanks to that, her family became harmonious and happy, and the children were also happier, no longer living in tension. Ms. Lian's story makes us understand that patience and repentance not only resolve past mistakes, but also open up new happiness for the present and future. Like Princess Kim Kwang, Ms. Lian transformed her life through patience. If we look broadly at society, we will see how many families break up just because of a lack of patience. Spouses argue over trivial matters. Parents and children conflict because everyone wants their ego to be heard. Friends drift apart because they are unwilling to yield to each other. Whenever there's a conflict, they react immediately. No one wants to be patient for a moment. And then happiness shatters. Trust breaks down. Whereas if someone knew how to be patient and step back, the ocean would be vast, the sky high. The saying, "One moment of patience brings 9 blessings," is a timeless summary. Patience does not mean weakness, nor is it resignation. Patience is the strength of wisdom, the ability to control oneself so as not to create more negative karma. When we are patient, we keep our minds from being burned by the fire of anger. When we are patient, we protect happiness, protect relationships, and also sow seeds of blessings for ourselves. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught, "Whoever patiently endures being scolded, that person is like a skilled warrior who wins battles with wisdom. That person is a wise one, respected by Buddhas and humans." These teachings show us that true strength does not lie in defeating others, but in defeating oneself. When we are angry, we are like a blazing fire. If we speak harsh words, if we act in anger, it is like adding fuel to the fire, making it burn more fiercely. But if we are patient, we are silent, we breathe deeply, then that fire gradually dies out. Silence at that moment is not defeat, but victory, because the victor is the one who maintains peace. The ancients said, "1 hour of patience, the wind subsides. 1 step back, the ocean is vast, the sky is high." In a family, if husband and wife know how to be patient with each other, the family will be peaceful. In society, if friends and colleagues know how to be patient with each other, affection will last. Within oneself, if we know how to be patient with desires and anger, the mind will be clear, and wisdom will open up. The lesson drawn from the story of King Pasenadi, Princess Kim Kwang, as well as the everyday story of Miss Lian, is patience and repentance. They not only resolve mistakes, not only diminish karmic results, but also open up the door to new happiness. Patience is strength, the key to maintaining family, to preserving love, and to protecting our own souls from suffering. So how do we practice patience in life? First, practice breathing. When anger arises, just by inhaling deeply and exhaling slowly, we can prevent the fire of anger from flaring up. Next, practice listening. When others are angry, let them finish speaking. Don't interrupt. Don't retort. Because a word spoken in anger is often a knife piercing another's heart. Finally, practice letting go. Don't hold on to trivial things. Remember that everything is impermanent. Today's troubles will pass. Every day, we can sit before a Buddha altar, join our palms, and repent. I vow to repent for all the times I was angry, all the times I failed to practice patience. May the Buddha bless me to live with patience and compassion. If that vow is repeated sincerely, it will gradually become a strength that nurtures peace of mind. When we know patience, we will suffer less. When we know repentance, our hearts will be lighter. When we know how to let go, we will find peace again. That is the path the Buddha taught, the key to resolving all hatred and making life happier. The Spiritual Buddhist Teachings channel wishes to convey a message. Take the practice of patience as your root and repentance as your path. Because patience will extinguish the fire of anger, repentance will cleanse mistakes, and both will open up a new life of joy and happiness for you. Perhaps each of us has at least once fallen into a situation where, due to a fit of anger, we lost a precious relationship in our lives. When anger flares up, we often think we are defending our reasons, asserting what is right, affirming our ego. But after the fire of anger subsides, all that remains is regret, distance, and sometimes relationships that can never be mended again. The sad thing is that in our anger, we often don't realize this. Only when everything has shattered do we painfully realize that we have alienated people, lost the genuine affection of those around us. The Buddha once taught that anger is a fierce fire that can burn away merit, burn away family bonds, and burn away our own peace. The ancients also said, "One thought of anger arises. Hundreds of thousands of obstacles open." Indeed, even a small fit of anger can turn friends into foes, close ones into strangers, and destroy the trust and love we have painstakingly cultivated for so long. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught, "He abused me, he struck me, he defeated me, he robbed me." In those who harbor such thoughts, hatred will never cease. He abused me, he struck me, he defeated me, he robbed me. In those who do not harbor such thoughts, hatred will cease. This is a deeply profound reminder. When we let anger control us, when we cling to hatred, we are the ones who suffer the most. But when we know how to let go, how to forgive, we immediately stop the raging purr of anger. There is a Buddhist story about a disciple who complained to the Buddha, "Venerable Sir, I have a friend who did something unfair to me. I am very angry. I cannot forgive him." The Buddha gently asked, "If you hold a hot coal in your hand with the intention of throwing it at your friend, before the coal reaches the other person, who gets burned first?" The disciple was suddenly speechless. Indeed, when we are angry, our words, actions, and thoughts are like hot coals, and we are the first to get burned. In everyday life, we often encounter such stories. There was a young man named Hoang who had a very close friend since childhood. They grew up together, shared many memories, and regarded each other as siblings. However, during a minor argument about money, Huang lost his temper and blurted out harsh and insulting words to his friend. His friend, out of self-respect, quietly left, deciding to cut off contact. Huang later regretted it immensely. He missed his friend, tried to contact him, but his friend had closed the door to that friendship. They were estranged for many years. Deep down, Huang was still tormented because for just one moment of anger, he had lost a deep friendship that he might never find again in his lifetime. Huang's story is a very relatable example for many people. Just one slip of the tongue in a fit of anger can shatter an entire friendship, a family bond, a relationship that we cherish. The regrettable thing is that words spoken in anger are often very sharp. They're like knives stabbing the listener's heart. And once it's an emotional wound, even with apologies and attempts to heal, a scar remains. The listener may forgive, but they can hardly forget. The Buddha taught that in life, humans have two most precious assets: relationships and trust. Once these are destroyed by anger, these two treasures will depart. Anger makes others lose trust in us, makes family bonds distant. And once lost, it is extremely difficult to regain them. Therefore, learning to control and let go of anger is not only for our own peace of mind, but also to preserve good relationships with others. In modern life, people face many pressures from work, family, and society. Therefore, anger can flare up more easily than ever. A husband, tired from work, just one unintentional word from his wife can make him explode. A wife, enduring much stress in raising children, just one careless, harsh word from her husband can cause all her pent-up emotions to erupt into anger. A child, under academic pressure, just one word of blame from their parents can make them react with stubbornness and resentment. Every day, small fits of anger like these silently accumulate, gradually creating distance, causing families to lose harmony. That is, losing people's hearts. There's something very thought-provoking. When we are angry with loved ones, we often don't hold back our words, thinking that they love us, they will understand us, they will forgive us. But it is precisely these fits of anger that cause relationships to fracture the fastest. Outsiders may forgive easily, but wounds from loved ones often run very deep. Maintaining a home requires much effort, but just one fire of anger can burn everything down. The Buddha taught that a wise person is one who stops before harsh words are uttered, before wrong actions occur. To preserve family happiness, to maintain family bonds, we must learn to see far, to think broadly. When we are angry, take a deep breath, step back. Because one step back, the ocean is vast and the sky is high. One word yielded, the waves are calm, and the wind is still. Often, just by remaining silent for a minute, we can preserve an entire relationship. Some ask, how do I become less angry? How do I avoid saying hurtful things in a fit of rage? The answer is very simple, yet profound. Practice mindfulness. When our mind abides in our breath, when we know how to return to the present moment, we will clearly see the anger arising in our hearts. And once we see it, we will no longer be its victim. Try cultivating the habit. Every time you get angry, take 3 deep breaths. Be silent. Think of the good things that person has done for you. Then the furshofsur of anger will gradually cool down. In life, no one can avoid disagreements and conflicts, but do not let those moments of anger steal what is most precious. Remember that family and friends are priceless treasures. Do not let just one word spoken in anger shatter a lifetime of love. The lesson from Hoang's story is a compassionate warning. Be careful with anger. 1 minute of uncontrolled emotion can cause lifelong regret. And when family bonds and friendships are lost, we realize that the victories and arguments of the past no longer mean anything. Therefore, the most important thing is to cultivate patience and compassion. Patience does not mean weakness, but is the strength of a wise person. Patience preserves happiness, protects relationships, and nurtures trust. Compassion is looking at others with understanding and forgiveness, not picking at faults. When we have patience and compassion, anger no longer controls us. Practice every day. When angry with someone, do not react immediately. Write down your feelings instead of speaking them. Find a quiet corner. Chant a Buddha's name or take 3 long breaths. Once your mind is calm, speak gently. Sometimes just saying, "I understand, I sympathize, let's find a solution together," is enough to extinguish a great anger. Finally, I would like to convey that anger is an invisible thief. It steals friendship, family bonds, family happiness, and even peace in the soul. Always remember the Buddha's teaching. Conquer hatred with compassion. Maintain peace with patience. When we know how to control and let go of anger, we not only preserve the love around us, but also maintain peace in our hearts. And that is the true happiness everyone seeks. In life, each of us has moments where our hearts boil with anger. An unwelcome word, a disrespectful action, an undesirable event, all are enough to ignite the fire of anger within us. Many people have shared that every time they finish being angry, they feel tired, heavy, their souls as if scorched. Some even lose sleep and become physically and mentally depleted due to a fit of anger. The sad thing is that when we get angry, not only do we suffer, but those around us are also drawn into that suffering. Thus, it can be said that anger is one of the most dangerous enemies of humanity. The Buddha once reminded us that there is no fire as fierce as anger, no evil karma as heavy as anger, and no enemy as dangerous as anger. Just hearing this alone is enough to realize how much truth his teaching contains. Anger is like a spark. If not extinguished in time, it will spread, burning down all the good things we have painstakingly cultivated. Try to look at yourself. Every time you get angry, your mind becomes clouded, your reason obscured. You easily blurt out bitter words, easily engage in impulsive actions, but then you regret it. You blame yourself. There are mistakes made in anger that we can correct, but there are also mistakes that can never be undone. How many families have shattered? How many friendships have faded? How many relationships have broken down? Just because of a lack of self-control in one moment of anger. In the scriptures, the Buddha once presented a very poignant image. He said that when a person harbors anger, it is like holding a hot coal with the intention of throwing it at someone else. But before that coal reaches the other person, their own hand gets burned. Anger is the same. It seems to harm others, but in reality, it harms us first. The story of King Ashoka in ancient India is also a testament. Initially, Ashoka was a brutal king. Whenever he got angry, he was ready to massacre. The people called him Ashoka the Cruel. But after hearing the Dharma, seeing the futility of anger, the king repented and resolved to reform. He became a benevolent king, ruling with compassion. And the people respectfully called him Ashoka the Great. Just one transformation in his mind, from anger to compassion, changed the destiny of a man and an entire nation. In life today, we also easily encounter similar examples. One woman once recounted that her husband was hot-tempered. Every time he got angry, he would shout, even smash things. Initially, she thought it was just a masculine temperament that could be accepted. But over time, those fits of anger made the family suffocating, the children fearful, and the marital affection gradually fractured. By the time he realized it, his wife and children's hearts were already deeply hurt, and all efforts to mend were difficult. That story makes us reflect that if everyone knew to stop, knew to control themselves from the beginning, they would not have to regret it later. The Buddha taught that to control anger, one must cultivate patience. Patience is not resignation or weakness, but the great strength of a wise person. A patient person is like a great tree standing firm in a storm, not easily swayed. A patient person can maintain peace for their family, for society, and for their own mind. In the Sutra of Patience, the Buddha affirmed that a patient person, even in a dangerous place, is not afraid, and even when facing slander, is not shaken. Another important thing to overcome anger is to cultivate compassion. When we have compassion, we will look at others with understanding and forgiveness. We understand that everyone makes mistakes sometimes. Everyone is sometimes clouded by ignorance. When we open our hearts instead of anger, we will feel pity. And when the heart has pity, the fire of anger can no longer burn fiercely. Some will ask, how can one practice compassion in today's busy life? The answer is to start with small things. When someone insults you, instead of immediately reacting, ask yourself, what suffering is that person experiencing that makes them speak such words? When pressured, instead of retaliating, think, if I react, both of us will suffer. If I remain silent, I might maintain peace. Just by cultivating a little compassion each day, it will gradually become our natural essence. A Zen master once advised his disciples, whenever anger arises, breathe deeply and chant the Buddha's name. The breath will help you calm down, and the sound of the Buddha's name will bring your mind back to peace. Instead of letting anger lead, choose to let mindfulness illuminate. Many people have practiced this and seen clear results. Just one moment of stopping can preserve a lifetime of happiness. Looking broadly, we will see that not being angry is keeping peace for the soul. Every time we get angry, we are burning ourselves. Every time we get angry, we are cutting the bond with others. And every time we get angry, we are losing the very peace in our hearts. Therefore, practicing to live gently, cultivating patience, and nurturing compassion is not only practicing the Dharma, but also the key to finding serenity, freedom, and true happiness. If you want a more harmonious family, a peaceful soul, a light life, remember that the key lies in not getting angry. A person can be rich, can be powerful, but if they are hot-tempered and harsh, they will suffer. A person can be poor, can be struggling, but if they know how to be patient, how to keep a gentle heart, they will still be at peace. Happiness or suffering does not lie in external circumstances, but in how we face the anger within our own hearts. Once again, let me reiterate the Buddha's teaching. Winning 1,000 battles on the battlefield is not equal to conquering oneself. Conquering oneself is the most glorious victory. And within that self, the greatest enemy is none other than anger. When we conquer anger, we have conquered an entire life. So from today, every time you feel anger about to flare up, remember the Buddha's teaching. Take a deep breath, smile, choose silence instead of arguing. That is the first step to living a life without anger. And when you are no longer angry, you will feel peace spreading, love expanding, and complete happiness in every moment of life. Every moment